Hello, it's us. Again, I'm still paranoid we're on the right channel, but anyway, get over that eventually. Right, so,
Yeah.
I was going to do a live chat meow there for a bit, but that's another story.
I'm the normal cup of tea is being swapped for non-alcoholic fizz, do reassure you, but we've just dropped my son, your stepson, off at his prom. This is all very exciting, so we're just drinking non-alcoholic fizz.
I don't appear to have one, mind you, but whatever. Just technical support, apparently. Right, okay. So, dripping all over me. Fine.
Anyway.
Sorry, carry on, yes. Domestic. Anyway, right, this evening, we thought we'd talk about overtaking, didn't we? And I meant to have the light on, but never mind.
That was the plan.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about overtaking, mainly because I think it's something that we don't get to teach very often, or don't put into place ways of teaching it. Would you agree?
Yes, and even though it's something that we're very well aware of and we have an idea about how we teach overtaking, it's not something that we do probably enough of, actually, is it? Even us, knowing we haven't got each other to do a simple overtaking.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just reading, I thought it was a message somewhere, it's not, it's Facebook saying wear a mask. Just bizarre. But anyway, to make it look fun, I am wearing a mask. So yeah, we thought we'd talk about overtaking, and I think clearing up what is overtaking as opposed to clearance. Overtaking cyclists, or particularly stationary vehicles, isn't overtaking. Overtaking cyclists can be. I think one of the main things with overtaking is when to do it, when not to do it is probably the most important thing, and therefore then how to do it. And I think it's quite a difficult thing to teach, isn't it? Because we very seldom get an opportunity to overtake a car in a 30 limit that's doing 20, for example, saying the 30 is appropriate, or in a 40, or particularly in national. It can be very difficult to find a car that's going slow enough to be able to overtake. And that's what we want to talk about, really, isn't it? How to make that happen, how to give those experiences, because we know that 60% of fatal accidents with novice and new young drivers are country roads. And I don't have any figures on this, but I'd like to bet a good percentage of that is inappropriate overtaking, and obviously corners too fast and stuff like that. But that's another live chat, isn't it? So we just thought we'd have a talk about what we do and just give you some ideas of what we do and how we make that work, really.
Yeah, as Blaine says, it's because it's not something that we're doing an awful lot. We can kind of mimic it a little bit, and we probably, in the period of time that you're with a pupil, maybe overtaking a cyclist how many times in a 40-ish hour training session? 10?
Yeah, I think turns where you are,
possibly.
But most places now, particularly around test areas, tend to have cycle routes, and you can cycle on the pavement most of the time now, etc. So certainly a lot less than it used to be. I was thinking this the other day. The other thing we used to end up overtaking quite a lot, is mopeds, you know, chicken chasers or whatever they were called. But now they're faster in cars, aren't they? You don't get to overtake them anymore. I used to overtake them all the time when I was first doing the job, but now I can't remember the last time we overtook a moped.
But so let's take cyclists for a start. We'll talk about cyclists because it's probably something that we're all doing with our pupils, overtaking cyclists at some point during their training sessions, and then we'll look at how you and I teach overtaking cars and how we bring that into lessons. So the first thing I would say with cyclists is just to be ultra aware that if you think about how long you've been driving for, how long you've been an instructor for, how long you've been teaching for, how many cyclists you have overtaken in your life as a driver, you probably wouldn't be able to hazard a guess, but we're talking triple figures, really, if not more.
Than that, yeah.
If you think about how often you're going to overtake a cyclist in your lessons, you're possibly counting on one or maybe two hands. So that is really significant for your learners. So the point where they pass a driving test and they're on the road overtaking cyclists, their experience of doing that is really rare. So when it comes to overtaking cyclists, be ultra aware of your level of instruction to start with. Probably, partly because when it comes to overtaking cyclists, if you get it wrong, it's messy. There isn't a second chance, is there? You get it wrong and it goes really wrong. So be ultra aware of your level of instruction, and be aware that regardless of their experience, even if they are test ready, whatever test ready is, they've been driving with you for a number of hours, a number of weeks, number of months. Remembering how many times they've overtaken a cyclist, it may well be that you are having to jump in with some kind of level instruction, so not letting the judgment go on its own. So I'm just probably teaching you guys to suck eggs, but of course the type of things that I talk about when I see a cyclist is I think very carefully about where my pupil's at with their needs, and I think very carefully about how I'm going to control that situation. So be aware that there's no reason why you can't be encouraging the pupil to be thinking about factors that they're taking into control themselves, but you are wanting to control that situation. So can you hear the control in this question? Give me 2 reasons why you're not going to overtake the cyclist. Okay. So sometimes just being aware that you could ask a question of which you have a control element in it. So give me 2 reasons why you're not going to overtake the cyclist. You've controlled before any kind of education happened. The opposite could be said the same. So give me 2 reasons why it's going to be safe to overtake the cyclist. Or why it is safe to overtake the cyclist. So beware of that. When it comes to the factors, we could just roll over the factors that I would be hoping that I'd be encouraging a pupil to be giving me back at the point where I'm asking them what factors they're taking into account. Age of the cyclist, how many cyclists, the condition of the road in front of the cyclist, so the potholes, the drain covers, knowing cyclists go round drain covers, the gradients, whether they're going to go fast, whether they're going to slow down. The classic, I think, that people perhaps don't think about is having a junction on the right. I wouldn't be overtaking anything with a junction on the right, because despite there perhaps being giveaway lines and the people coming out of that junction and turning left at that junction shouldn't be doing that if their side of if the road isn't clear, I just wouldn't be risking overtaking the opposite junction. Isn't it? So, yeah. Same with junction on the left.
But I think people tend to think if they look to the right, they're thinking, well, I can see clearly, I'm just going around the cyclist, I'll be fine. But then what happens when the cyclist turns right without looking over their shoulder or an arm signal, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So, numerous things. So again, I'm not going to go through the factors, but these are the type of things that you're wanting to draw out of your pupils so that you can be finding out what's going on in their head, as well as, of course, being kind of building up those experiences for the times that they're going to be overtaking cyclists when you're not there.
And also, some of you guys might see I've taken a couple of videos for the cycling people, I can't remember who now, but the cycling people, and one of the things that came out with that really is what does the rule? The rule says you must give cyclists as much room as you would a car. But actually, what does that mean? And you look at the pictures in the driving manuals, the driving essential skills particularly. It's got a picture of a cycle and it's got a picture of a car completely on the other side. So the thing I say to my learners and PDIs is, don't overtake if you wouldn't overtake that as a car. So therefore, you give it that enough room, and just to make them think about if they were to fall off, how would they fall off? Would they fall down or would they fall across? Well, good probably just stalled there because someone called, who I just cut off, so I'm sure they'll call again in a second. So just that stuff about what does that mean? It basically means you wouldn't overtake the cyclist if you wouldn't overtake that as a car. So you need that room that if they hit a pole as you're going past, you don't run over their head, basically. So again, you guys know that, but it's just worth remembering that but your pupils may not know that and may not really be thinking about those things. So it's worth just that, giving that information, isn't it?
So let's look at overtaking other vehicles, other cars, for example. As Blaine kind of touched on earlier, we don't do that in our lessons. We're not very often coming across situations where we have the ability to be overtaking other vehicles. So it's very, very rare. Now, Blaine and I are obviously really fortunate to be able to have each other to be able to use for reciprocal kind of driving arrangements, but I don't think it takes much for you to find a colleague or a friend or someone else in your association or someone else in your franchise that you could do this arrangement with, but it really is invaluable, really, isn't it? It's possible to go out in a car with a pupil, or even a couple of pupils if you're wanting to do a couple of pupils, with your colleague who's also in their own car with a pupil or 2 pupils, and go off and find those roads where you know that you could find places in that road where a little bit of a setup would allow you to be overtaking each other, so reciprocal overtaking. So certainly we're lucky around here, we've got some longer, straighter, more visible national speed limit kind of rural roads that you would be able to have that opportunity on. Now, we don't come across those opportunities because everybody's doing 55, 60 on them. So what happens is that we arrange it so that we are the lead car, if you like, is the one that is going to pace themselves slow enough to allow the driver, the learner behind, to overtake. That then becomes the lead car to then slow down and allow the next car to overtake. Now, I have to say that on the couple of times that we've done this, and we must film it. Actually, we talk about it all the time. We must film it. to be ultra aware that it is just as valuable to look at reasons why you're not going to overtake than it is to experience the overtaking. And I think just as valuable, if not more valuable.
Absolutely, I think it's the biggest thing, and certainly I'm sure it's where you guys are as well. There's roads where I can think of somewhere we are, sort of through Burley, for example, where it's bendy, but it's broken white lines all the way around. But there's no way you would ever overtake on those roads. So it's that conversation. Legally, it's fine here. Actually, would you? You know, because you literally really tight bends, and they're solid white, they're broken white lines. It's bizarre. So those sort of conversations as well. But yeah, it's absolutely, you know, it's brilliant. It's good fun. You get lots of conversations. It's quite nice when you have two learners because they can battle off each other, and you can go out. And if you've got two learners doing an hour and a half session each, that means you could go 3 hours and do this, and you could do your all roads at the same time. You know, your speed on approach to bends and all that sort of stuff, the stuff that kills them when they pass. You can do all that in one nice big session. Therefore, you can get out and really get off to areas that you wouldn't normally be able to get to. Because I know someone's going to come and say, well, I live in the central London, I can't do this. But actually, with a bit of planning, you can. Even if they get on a train, you meet them outside London, Oxshot or something like that, and you go out and you spend a day out there with your pupils coming in by train. There's always a way of doing these things if you are willing to put a little bit of working planning into it, really. But it's fascinating about, you know, as Lou said, about when not to overtake. That's the biggest conversations, I think, because and the thing that we tend to do is you may start off, let's say it's national, and say you're not going to hold other people up. The front one can do 30, then you overtake them. You can see actually that's quite easy. Then when you get them to do 55 and you're doing 60, it suddenly becomes a lot more difficult. It takes a lot longer. So I used to do this a lot with a colleague. I think I said this the other week, which has led to this chat. We used to meet up on a Friday afternoon, go off and either do mock tests for each other or go into reciprocal overtaking. And the road we used was about 5 miles long, a couple of roundabouts each end and one in the middle. And it was brilliant because you could go down the first one, which is about 1.5 miles to the roundabout, do that differential and look at it and say, look, this is how long it took. It took 5 lampposts or 7 trees or whatever. Now look, the differential in speed is only 5 miles. Now look, it's taking 20 lampposts, and you can make that comparison then. You can show how long it's that differential in speed. So if you can do 60, they're doing 30, it's pretty straightforward. They're doing 55, you're doing 60, it's 5 miles. That takes forever to get past.
And I think that this is the biggest thing that we highlight when we do any kind of overtaking, is the judgment that one is needing based on the speed, and of course the speed of the cars coming towards you on the other side of the road. And I think that tends to be the thing that is forgotten, isn't it, most of all, is that judgment, that decision making has to take into account obviously the guys coming towards you at 60 miles an hour. So let's give you a little hint and tip about how we do this. So even if you don't have a colleague, if you don't have somebody you can do reciprocal overtaking with, this is one thing that we do all the time with all of our pupils, is overtaking on dual carriageways, but with a slight difference. So go and find yourself a really nice long dual carriageway, preferably 2 lanes, because it means that everybody's a little bit closer to each other. Preferably, obviously, a central reservation that you can see through. And what we do is we set up an overtake. So we've got a car in the left-hand lane. We set up an overtake, so we imagine that the road is a single carriageway road. And we imagine that we're going to overtake the car in front, so we might be doing 60 plus miles an hour. Let's say the car or the caravan is doing 50-ish miles an hour. And we set that up. But what I do with my guys is I get them to look on the opposite dual carriageway at the traffic that's coming on the opposite dual carriageway, and I ask them which car they think that they will be able to overtake the caravan or the tractor or whatever it is that we're going to do, come back onto the left and get back in safely before which kind of car coming in the opposite direction is going to get to us. So we're imagining it's a single carriageway and we're making that decision. And you know, they judge it wrong again and again and again. It's amazing
how long it actually does take to come back in.
It's really quite a fascinating exercise to do. So when you think about the fact that this is judgment that we're wanting to do, this is judgment that we're wanting them to gain some experience of, we can't do it particularly safely or well on the roads that we were talking about wanting them to get the experience of. But dual carriageways works really well for that. So if you're going to go off and do dual carriageways lessons and you're talking about overtaking obviously on the dual carriageway, bring in overtaking on single carriageway roads and use the carriageway on the opposite side as if it was the carriageway on a single carriageway, and get them judging what car is coming towards them they will be able to get in for. And do it on different cars, do it on the slower moving cars, do it on cars towing things, and do it on lorries, because that's really fascinating.
Well, they can see the lorry for further away for a start, and they do tend to be doing, I was going to say 56 a lot and do 60 now, but that then if they're doing 60, that replicates obviously a car on a single carriageway doing 60 coming towards you. I know they could be going faster or slower, but and they're just big, aren't they? And you can see them some way. And it is, we've got a road near us called the A31. It's just, you can see on, it's 15 miles long or whatever, but you can see 2 or 3 miles at every point, can't you? You can, and it's brilliant for that, because it is surprising how long it can take to get out and come back in again with that car coming the other way. Small lorry. It's fascinating.
I think that when you do it as well, it's really important to set up the overtake so that you're going to start the overtake at a point where you will, at the point where the overtake is finished, be able to see in a rear view mirror the point that you started the overtake as well. Because actually what you're wanting to get them to get an experience of is how much road it's taken. So that's the first thing, how much road it's going to take, the judgment of overtaking, and then bringing in the cars on the opposite carriageway is a great thing. Yes, Aileen, I would agree. It's invaluable. I wouldn't do dual carriageways without using that as an opportunity.
And I think it's again a differential, so you want to be trying to find that around our way. We find them all the time, caravans going up the hill, there's certain part of the day, over my head they go up the hill. Trouble is you can get lorries overtaking caravans, which buggers it up, but you got a caravan doing 45 up the hill, you're doing 70, it's pretty straightforward. Then you're going to overtake that car doing 68 when you're doing 70, and just show that actually it just takes forever then. And it's so powerful for them to realise that, because the first time they try it could be the last time they try it if it's a single carriageway, and that sounds dramatic, but it really can be. And the other thing I think is relevant to this is something I do with my people, and I know you do as well, Lou, is talk about what's your escape routes, what you're going to do if you're being overtaken by, because we've got a road between us, between a place called Brockenhurst and Lyndhurst, and it's just fatal, it's a nightmare. But actually most of these country roads, not lanes, but country proper roads, national speed limit ones, you can actually get free cars, can't you? And we've done it a couple of times. Not us in the middle, by the way. So that's then really powerful for checking your mirrors regularly, because if you're checking your mirrors regularly and someone's overtaking and you see the car coming, you just squeeze over. Obviously the oncoming car sees it, they squeeze over, they do go through the middle. And I had people do it only about a year ago. She just checked her mirror and she just didn't panic at all, just came over, the guy went through the middle, and the other guy came the other way, went over. Of course you'll see it if you're coming towards it, but again it's really powerful for the mirrors, but also it shows that you don't do one of them and end up hitting the trees because we're in the forest. So that is to do with overtaking. It's not us doing it, but it's to do with other people overtaking us. And just come over, it's like, how far can you go? I know you particularly do this exercise. How far can we go over? What's it feel like when you start to touch that white line, you know, the border line, and then you get the stuff that's rough because people don't go there, and you can feel it all, can't you? And it's just getting them to do those little movements to show that actually that can work. And you know, if the two cars or the car being overtaken, the one that's coming towards, spot the overtake, there's no reason why there should be a head on, because there is enough room on most of these proper A roads, you know, not your country lanes, but your country roads.
Yeah, I think that's a really big thing. So talking about the what ifs and the rescue areas, if somebody else is doing an overtake that you're going to have to potentially save people's lives on, that is really critical. I think, Neil, your point there about the point one being that you think that people forget that they need to accelerate when they're going past a vehicle, and they forget that they can't go back into their original lane quick enough. I don't think it's a case of almost forgetting. It's a case of they don't know in the first place.
If you've not done it, you can't judge it.
That's the biggest thing. If you've not got the experience of doing it, then it's not in your brain to forget. You just don't know. So these are tips of how you can get them not only talking about it, obviously with you, but practicing it. You know, really going out there and finding ways of doing it. As
we were saying the other week on the doing wrong right, it's okay talking about stuff, but that only goes to a very basic level. It's about going out and doing it, isn't it? And what was I just thinking about? One of the issues I have in my head, probably not, well, I can think one or two people's I had, well actually they were Louise's, but I took them out a couple of times, and one particularly, that if you're always saying, well, there's actually enough room for free cars through here if you squeeze over, certain people you might be encouraging a little bit, thinking, oh, he said this, I'll be the dodgy one overtaking. So like everything, you've got to be a little bit careful on the people you do that with, I think, to a certain degree. So someone's saying, what about horses? What about horses? And cyclists? Yeah, absolutely, they're all overtaking, aren't they? I think we're thinking more today about the overtaking of getting out and getting the back in, but horses, and we spoke about cyclists at the beginning, so you can rewind it, Justin, if you didn't hear that. But horses, absolutely, we've got, you know, wild horses around here, and it's wide and slow and all that type of stuff. Little tip that I do for overtaking horses and get the people to do is to drop the clutch, because that just takes a little bit of extra noise away, as long as they don't hit the gas at the same time, because you have the opposite problem then.
I think the thing with horses as well is to a certain extent be led by the rider, because the rider knows their horse, and the rider will be encouraging the horse to act, obviously, or behave in a certain way as well. So certainly being aware of that. But I think, you know, any rider will tell you that the unpredictability of a horse is exactly that. It is unpredictable, and it will even catch them out. So I think that again, you're wanting to leave enough room for a horse to startle, and of course when a horse startles it will pivot. So basically, as long as the horse is, you want to leave wide, because the horse is going to bring its backside out. So so that's the biggest thing. And then of course it's going to throw its rider as well, so that's to be aware of. And again, I think, you know, when it comes to things like that, to be again ultra aware of what else is going on around you in that situation, because you may well choose to overtake the horse, you may well deem it to be safe, but I think that I would be ultra aware of what else is happening. So if there was a motorbike coming, if there was you know, a lawnmower in the field down the road, anything that's just going to, a leaf on the road, you know what they're like, woo, leaf. We're having woo, leaf. They, you know, they freak out about things like that. So just being ultra aware that it might not necessarily be you, it might be something else.
And it's having those conversations, isn't it? So not overtaking a horse, particularly if there's an oncoming vehicle, you have to be completely on the other side of the road. No squeezing past. And that's why, going back to cyclists, talking about why cyclists ride two abreast quite often is to stop people squeezing past. Why do they come out by junctions? Because kids on their cycle proficiency, which isn't called that anymore, are taught to come out by junctions. One, to give a bit more room to the car that sticks its front out and got a little bit more time to react, and two, so you can't, you know, it disencourages people from being overtaken. A lot of car drivers think they're, you know, doing it to be a pain, but actually they're doing it for safety reasons. So those conversations are important. Again, it's about when not to do it, and necessarily then to always do it. Absolutely.
So I think just to kind of reiterate, this is more a talk about overtaking cars, because it's not something that we're doing in our lessons. So if you have come to the chat a little bit later, go back and listen to what we talk about when we talk about making a judgment when it comes to overtaking cars, and how we use dual carriageways to practice overtaking on a single carriageway. I know it sounds a bit weird if you didn't hear it, but go and have a listen to that, because it's something that you guys will be able to implement from tomorrow onwards. You know, next time you're on that dual carriageway, you'll be using that tip as well. So
just an extra thing, particularly if you've got to drive to dual carriageways like we have to our test areas, if you like, or test centres. It's not boring as such, but you can run out of things to do. But that exercise can go on, can't it, really? Because you are overtaking different things. We get the tractor as well, and so, you know, and lorries doing 60 now. It takes longer to overtake a lorry now on a dual carriageway than it did before, because, you know, they're going faster, etc. And that's not a major issue, but say judging that other vehicle coming the way, it's just different, and it's good fun, isn't it? And I think it's something that will be unique in your area, that you'll find other instructors won't be doing it, because I know a lot of you guys will go, oh, that's a good idea, have a go at that. Come back in a month and see if you have actually done it or not, you know, without being harsh. But you know, all these things sound good, but it's actually going and doing it, isn't it? And particularly the dual carriageway one, you can do that without a reciprocal friend, but the reciprocal one is really good. And as I said before, I used to just, you know, book Friday afternoons off, and if we didn't do any overtaking or had mock tests, we'd go and play golf instead. So, because trying to get two driving instructors' diaries to match is a nightmare, isn't it? We find that ourselves, don't we? Particularly as we've got a child in the middle that sort of doesn't like coming on mock tests, particularly.
Actually, he does.
He does, yeah, he does. He gets his own bit of paper and he's away, isn't he?
Yes, Neil, thanks for clarifying that. You're absolutely right. Their desire to come back in, isn't it? And again, that works really well on dual carriageways, because of course they have that desire anyway on dual carriageways as well, to go past something and then come back in, and talking very much about whatever it is that you've just overtaken, where you're seeing it, so which mirror you're seeing it, and the space between you and whatever it is that you've overtaken. So that's a big deal.
Is it like to suddenly speed up? If it's a lorry, it won't, but if it's I don't know,
cyclist going downhill,
or a car that's doing 50 and a 70 and then comes off his phone just at the point where you've overtaken, speeds up to 70 again, that sort of thing. So, you know, are they deep in a conversation on the phone, or with their passengers suddenly, oh no, and they're off, and then you're trying to come back in, and so those, you know, those conversations are really, really important, because it's not an easy task, and people, I'm sure you guys have probably been overtaken today by someone who did it inappropriately, so we know that we see it all day long, and we can do our bit to try and to even, you know, bring those incidents down a bit, I think. And it just makes a change, doesn't it? Something different to do.
I'm going to top my glass up.
Oh yeah, I think we're done.
Yeah, I am.
Because I forgot to put the light on, so.
So you get plunged into darkness with our fizz.
Yeah, well, I said I'm ready.
So yeah, so go and try some of those things out. Congratulations to all those mummies and daddies who are have finished GCSEs. Well done, those of you children with 16-year-old children, and hopefully you've got a night off as well if you sent them off to a prom like we have.
Just got to wait up till 2 o'clock in the morning to pick them up again. So there you go.
So we'll say good night.
We will. Do we know what's next week? Go on.
It
It
is possibly a closer look at the Highway Code,
Oh yes.
which we've been putting off for a little while, I think,
Yes.
for various reasons. But
Yeah.
so that's next week. But I can't remember the day, so we'll look at that. And Tuesday, I have a feeling it's ringing bells.
No idea.
So.
Okay, okay.
Good night.
Okay. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye. I'm saying